Today is all about why he did what he did. When I was younger, my mum always used to say that life can change within a moment. Within a speck, we can find ourselves in situations we never expected. What can get us through those times? Our mindset, the right people, and so much more. I am delighted to have Mark Colbourne MBE joining me today. He is someone who grabs your attention from the first moment you meet him. He has the ability to convey his life experiences in ways which make you want to stop, listen, and act. I'm truly inspired by you, Mark. The first time I met you, literally, there was something that I felt connected. And whenever we have a conversation, I really feel inspired. It's almost like there's something that I feel that if I want to achieve, I can go out there and do it. So thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. My pleasure to be on your podcast. So welcome, everybody.
And it will be really good to understand more about your backstory. You grew up in Wales. Tell us what life was like growing up in Wales and what experiences you had in those early years.
Yeah, very much so. I think, first of all, I was born in 1969, so obviously the 70s, were a great time for me, as a young child growing up in, a working class environment. My mum was a caretaker of a school, which was actually about 50 meters from the house. So my mum was never late for work. And my dad was a crane driver, for British Steel. And I guess, growing up in, as I said, a working class family, life was just great fun. It was the time of freedom. And for me personally, probably around when I was about 5 or 6, I started to sort of gain memories. And I remember 1977, which was, the Queen's Jubilee, the Silver Jubilee, when we had parties on the street and unlimited sandwiches, which is what I could remember. So yeah, it was a great time, a great place. As you can imagine, the heavy industries in South Wales, certainly the coal mines, the open cast mines and the steelworks. So hard work, grafting was basically what I grew up with, which was part of my DNA now, I guess. So yeah, it was a good time, lots of fun, lovely family, no brothers or sisters. And obviously, as you know, I loved sport, I loved movement. And I think my parents thought when I was probably about 10, there was something wrong with me because I could just never sit still, But I think that was just the love, the love I have for movement and sport and certainly dopamine, which, we'll come on to a little later.
Amazing. You talked about 1977, so I know I'm giving away my age. That was the year I was born, so that's great. So you were known as Margaret's boy,
Yes.
So your mum, Margaret. So what was it about being Margaret's boy how did that form you? What experiences did you get during that relationship?
Yeah, I think, being an only child, as I said, no brothers or sisters, naturally you're going to get all the attention, of course, no pets, we had no pets, no brothers or sisters. So my parents almost did everything for me, and it was probably when I was about maybe 10 or 11, my mum explained that unfortunately 5 years before I was born, she miscarried with twins. Because I kept saying to my mum, why did you give me a middle name? Nobody else had a middle name, okay? Or maybe one or two, but hardly any of my friends, And she said, well, your middle name, Lee, represented that if you were going to be born a girl, it was going to be called Leanne. I said, really? She said, yeah. Because 5 years earlier, before I was born, my mum miscarried with 2 girls, twins. So then I understood why they literally, almost called me the golden child, that they doted on me and did everything for me because they didn't think, they could have any more children, But when I turned up, naturally, they were grateful, they really were. So yeah, family life, great fun, just loved going on holidays. And, my dad worked really hard. He worked in British Steel, as a crane driver. And in 40 years of working for British Steel, he never missed a day, which I guess for me is something that I'm proud of on behalf of him, which is quite rare these days, isn't it? So my dad would walk to work in the snow, in the rain, if he had to, So yeah, it was a great time, and I think it's a big thanks to them that they instilled the values into me that I still have today, albeit 44 years on, So yeah, it was good. It was a really good time, actually. Good memories.
And that experience we have when we're growing up, we see how our parents operate and how they behave. Like, it sows the seeds for us. So, like, you said your dad never missed a day of work, then, that work ethic, it becomes so fundamental. I think your dad was known as Mr. Nice Guy.
Yes.
And our parents, like, they're pivotal to who we become, like who we are today, like whatever those experiences, they define who we are. So what are those values that Mr. Nice Guy gave you that make you who you are today?
Yeah, I think, the true values, of life is honesty, integrity, accountability, certainly politeness. My dad used to say, always give out what you want back. And I kept thinking, what does he really mean by that? And it's true, that if you want a calm, collective life, peaceful life, then that's who you have to become. Otherwise, you return, the opposite, So I think certainly the hard work, the determination, certainly the discipline, and to use a great quote, by Mike Tyson, a very famous boxer, is discipline is doing what you hate, but doing it like you love it. And I guess all my life I've always had that mindset, which was passed down from my parents, And my mum was a hard worker. She really was. My mum literally through the 70s and the 80s would scrub floors on her hands and knees before machinery, was invented to clean floors, So I suppose just replicating, what they did and who they were, because as I said, my dad was a gentleman through and through, very calm, very collective, very wise. Whereas I think my mum was a mirror of him, but you never crossed my mum, which, yeah, on a few times I did, as a teenager, not intentionally, but yeah, my mum obviously came from I suppose Irish stock, very tough lady, but just gentle, So yeah, I never crossed my mum, I did have a few thick years, but I think that was just standard in the 70s, So yeah, it was good memories,
And how, looking back now, being the only child, being loved so much, the way that you've spoken about it, like with so much fondness, with so much love, how did that define you and your actions going forward?
Yeah, I think, being almost like a replication really of my parents, I suppose it put me in good stead, certainly then for my school years and when I studied sports science in college, because it's nice to be nice, it's the old analogy, if you can be anything, be nice, because I think there's enough trauma in the world, there's enough change in the world, certainly unprecedented change that sometimes we don't want, because as human beings we don't like change, and yet technically we're perfectly made for change as logical thinking primates, So I think, yeah, they definitely set me up to be a gentle individual, but at the same time in sport, I suppose I had my mum's drive, So yeah, my late father used to say that, Mark doesn't have a stop button. And I suppose then if you fast forward to 2012, he was probably right, So yeah.
2012, we'll come back to that a
Very
bit
much so.
later. You know, I want to keep the audience intrigued and excited about what we're going to talk about. So you grew up in this very happy, hardworking family. And then what was life like as a young adult in Wales? And, you know, what kind of experiences did you have during that time?
Yeah, well, it was predominantly sport related, you know, even through school, even though I enjoyed school. You know, certainly then when I went to college, started studying, you know, sports science. And I suppose it gave me a really deeper insight into human behavior, you know, having studied psychology and just always being curious, you know, and just enjoying that, you know, that process in college, meeting new people from different towns, you know, from different parts of South Wales, you know. And I guess then when I started playing volleyball, you know, I almost fell in love with volleyball just because of the excitement and, you know, almost every point it's a new experience and something different's happening. And then I was privileged, you know, to play for Wales, you know, as a young man then, you know, I was literally 19, 20. And that was a great privilege to get an insight into international sport. And what does it really mean, you know? And it was a hobby, it was a passion, and thoroughly enjoyed it. You know, I really did, and played in 3 British championships. So yeah, it was great fun. And then I met, you know, my wife, and I suppose at the age of 20, nearly 21, you know, falling in love unconditionally, you know, because I guess I got married for life in my head and my heart, you know. And my job at the time, I was a stained glass designer. I just fell in love with creativity, you know. Maybe there's an element of the challenge behind it. I don't know, maybe. And really enjoyed, you know, the process of designing, selling, project management, you know. And that was great, you know. I really enjoyed it. So, and then literally 3 years later, my daughter turned up, you know, and yeah, she was just I suppose just a jewel, you know, to the family, because remembering that when I was growing up as an only child, you know, I was almost now, I suppose, living my father's steps. Does that make sense? You
Of
know?
course.
So yeah, Jessica, when she arrived in 1994, was just a gift, you know, a wonderful child. And she's now taller than me. So, but no, great life, settled into work, you know, obviously enjoying the design inside of it, and still continued to, you know, participate in sport, but not as much because, you know, family priorities, of course, you know. So yeah, it was a good time, certainly, you know, through the 90s. They call it the naughty 90s, which it probably was actually.
The naughty 90s. So you talked about your daughter Jessica. So like, what does fatherhood mean to you? You know, you saw it, you being parented. What does fatherhood mean to Mark?
Yeah, I think it's a huge responsibility, you know, that you have to be prepared to take on, you know, because now you're almost now a coach, you're now a teacher, you're almost a bodyguard, a security for this little human being, and I suppose it's very unfair to try and mold that child into who you want them to be, whereas my parents just allowed me to be me, okay? And my dad always said, just be you, but always be the best you. So I suppose when Jessica then was going through, you know, nursery and then obviously into school, it was just allowing her to be who she really is, you know, and then supporting her when she's pursuing her interests or her hobbies or whatever, you know, but always just being there as a guiding light, you know, which I suppose you can only be as a parent, you know, because children, in my case, will always find their own way, you know. So yeah, it's a great privilege, you know, to have a wonderful daughter, and I feel proud that, you know, she obviously grew up as a good person, you know, which is which is a good thing, you know.
Wonderful. You've spoken a lot about sports. You studied sport, even when you were doing the stained glass window designing and that creative side, you still were really passionate about sport. What is it about sport that has that effect on you?
I think for most people who, you know, let's look at the negative. For those people that don't exercise, okay, and I'm not patronizing anybody who doesn't want to move, because in my opinion their health is their responsibility, okay. But having studied sport and knew at the time, and certainly then took a deep dive into how important is movement, for instance, okay, because when we move it helps with our systems, cardiovascular, respiratory, reproductive, recovery. All of our systems get stronger through movement, okay. And I heard a quote a few weeks ago and it completely blew my mind, that sitting down is the new smoking. I was like, what? Because the sedentary life that, you know, the planet has lived, certainly for the last 40 years, 30 years maybe, is detrimental to our physical health. Then go down another level to our mental health, sometimes even to our spiritual health, you know. So it's so important to move, okay, even just a little bit. But knowing, even as I said, in the late 80s into the 90s, knowing how important movement was to me, because I just felt it. If I didn't train 2 or 3 times a week, I felt maybe not unhappy, but unhealthy. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel like I had a skip in my step. So I guess it was just that passion, you know, to continue to move. And as I may have said to you when we, you know, did the brief for this this podcast, you know, Daley Thompson was my idol. You know, even though my father was my hero, Daley Thompson was my sporting idol, you know. And to see him win his gold medal in 1980 and then again in 1984, I kept saying to my father, this guy's incredible. You know, he's world class at 10 events. Wow, you know. So I always looked up, you know, to Daley Thompson, to aspire to maybe, just maybe one day, you know, be like him, you know. So that spurred me on, apart from movement, was to maybe, just maybe one day. But who knows?
Yeah, one day, who knows? So Mark, there might be someone sat in DIFC in central London, in New York, listening to our podcast right now, and they may be thinking, oh, I need to start moving. I need to do a bit of exercise. Like, what tips can you give to them?
I think the first thing, you know, is to understand the question. Yeah, the question is what's stopping you, okay? Rather than being pushed into it, which is something my parents never did, okay? My parents always said, what would you like to do? Okay, would you like to play football, rugby, swimming, athletics, whatever? What would you like to do? And I guess I always had the inquisitive mindset of, well, I don't know, but let's find out. Now, whether that's a Scorpio thing, I don't know. Okay, as a Scorpio, I don't know. But I was happy to always try. And there's a great quote by Michael Jordan, you know, the famous basketball player, and the quote goes like this. Everybody fails at something, and I cannot accept that, because what I cannot accept is not trying, because everybody fails at something. So it's better to try then fail rather than not try, because if you don't try, you've already failed, you know. And the quote that's based on I can accept failure, but I cannot accept not trying, it just stuck with me all my life. I'd rather do something and then fail and go, oh, well, at least I learned from it, you know, rather than just go, well, I can't do that. Well, technically then you failed, you know. So I guess I was always happy to try, but always at the same time enjoyed the process of movement. You know, I know it sounds crazy, but even as a teenager going into my adulthood, I loved the feeling of exhaustion. It's really weird, you know, to explain, because then I knew in my head and my heart that there's only one thing that's going to happen. You're going to improve. You're going to get stronger, fitter, faster, whatever, you know. So I think the advice that I would give to anybody is just ask the question, what's stopping you? Then evaluate that voice, because it's in your head. Because in our head, we have two voices. And when you evaluate the emotional voice, the question is, how do I control it? Because we all know that movement's good for us. So what's stopping you? Okay. Then managing that voice. Okay. How do you overcome the voice saying to you, oh, Monica, just sit and do nothing. You'll be fine. Of course you'll be fine, as long as you've got a pulse. But the question to ask yourself is, do you really want to experience optimum health? Okay. Or maybe even ask the question, what is optimum health? Because as soon as you start to obtain it, it then becomes an obsession to maintain it, which is one of the reasons I moved to Dubai, for my health, you know. So I think the advice would be to evaluate, you know, that voice. Then what do you enjoy? And if you don't know what you enjoy, go and try everything. Everything. Badminton, snooker, football, rugby, squash, anything. Just go and try it. Because I've met people, I mean this, Olympians and Paralympians, who never did sport as a child. And they maybe stumbled across a sport in their teenage life, or maybe even in their 20s. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I feel amazing, you know. And I said this to you when we spoke, my vision now, you know, is to inspire 1 million people to look good, feel great, and be happy.
That's amazing. 1 million people. And how are you doing that?
We're probably on about 200,000 at the moment, so still got a long way to go.
Amazing.
You know, but, you know, the conferences I've spoke at, the leadership, you know, events, podcasts, of course. And then when you throw in radio, maybe TV, maybe there is a few more, you know. But for me, it's a vision and a goal, you know, that I can work towards, you know, and know that, you know, I may never achieve that number. But then again, I may have already surpassed it. Who knows, you know? But my brain doesn't know any different, you know, so we'll keep soldiering on.
Wonderful. You told me a story when we spoke prior to this podcast about someone who attended your event and they were inspired to really go for something. Do you want to share a bit about that with the audience?
Yeah, I think, you know, for many people who attend, you know, a conference or a speaking engagement or a gathering, they just keep, as an adult that doesn't have a disability, for instance, you know. And I've met so many people who take up cycling or take up running, you know, and, you know, people who have that huge pattern interrupt in their life because they're aspiring for something, whatever it is, okay? And then they just go and do a park run or they go and cycle, okay, for 10 minutes. And when the body dumps that dopamine and they start to feel good, okay, without energy drinks, okay, or, I don't know, the stimulation of coffee or whatever, they suddenly think, hang on, this is free, okay? And I think personally that's a feel-good factor for me, you know? And the people that do the 10Ks, the people that do the half marathons, the people who start to cycle, you know, it's those people that I feel that all, and we'll come on to this, everything that I've gone through was worth it. Just to see that person, you know, change their life for the better, you know. And yeah, we've had people who have done half marathons, people who have cycled. You know, one of my friends here, you know, lives in Dubai. He'd never cycled before. You know, he's now racing, as in racing, you know, as a cyclist. So yeah, it's a great moment in time to feel good, you know, that I've helped, you know, to create a lasting change, you know, definitely.
That's wonderful. I mean, like I said earlier, you've sure inspired me. So I can imagine that impact that you have on other people.
Yeah, the most difficult thing of all is deciding what you want to achieve, because the human brain says, I can't do that. So you stop. You just stop, you know, because The goal is so far away. Okay, and I used to say this to my cycling coach. How are these people breaking these world records? Because I was maybe 1 minute behind that time, over 10 miles or 16 kilometers. But I never thought, I can't do it. It's really weird. I always had this mindset of, I'm going to try. Which is crazy, isn't it? Because the brain will only believe whatever you tell it, so.
And when we do one extra push-up or run that one extra case, suddenly we realize that we are capable of doing it. It's just we needed to push beyond the boundary we set within ourselves.
Yeah, because the body only does one thing. It'll improve. Okay, you do one more push-up, you run one more mile, you cycle 1 more kilometer. When you then rest and recover, that's when the magic happens. It doesn't happen when you're training. The magic happens at the cellular level when you rest and recover and you sleep,
So all those elements are really important.
Yeah, 100%.
And then just going back to your life in Wales as an adult, in a family environment, how important is us having our own identity, like in a relationship, in a family environment?
I think it's really important because everybody plays a part. So, when I turned up, as I said, as an only child, my parents were probably learning from me because, we're never the finished article. We're always evolving as people, as humans, So I think it's important for everybody to play their part. And understandably, as you grow older into your teenage life and adult life, your parents then are still evolving, if that makes sense. They're still learning from you, And I think for me personally, now I'm feeling that feeling with my daughter, that she's now continuously to allow me to evolve as a human being, Does that make sense? Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
And I think if we stop evolving and stop changing, we'll stagnate. And then all the bad things that come with stagnation,
100%.
Whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, will kick in.
Yeah, you become bored. Imagine having every day to do nothing. What would you do?
Exactly.
You go stir crazy, Yeah. So it's always important to have an interest, a hobby, a passion. Whatever that passion is, it's so important, because it keeps us thinking, planning, doing, and then reviewing, because, we like to aspire to improve, whatever that is, Yeah.
Awesome. I feel all inspired by that. So thanks so much. Who were your influences in your adult years?
Oh, gosh, good question. I think there's two answers, actually. I think business, obviously, if you go back to, the naughty 90s, as we mentioned, just seeing the life of the entrepreneur evolve, and then certainly if you go to the late 90s into the 2000s when technology, was starting to evolve, and then businesses, global businesses, accelerating and growing exponentially, and that for me then, you have to then, I suppose, take your hat off to those global entrepreneurs like Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, for instance, and now Elon Musk, just these incredible thought leaders, and I suppose looking back at the time, gosh, so many, business owners who took private companies, onto the global stage, especially. I've always had a passion for cars, I really have, and seeing, the increase of cars of popularity like Lotus, TVR, which is, cars from the UK. I know there's a dealership here, a Lotus dealership, actually, thinking about it. And then certainly, you know, the sports classics, you know, the MGs, the MG BGTs, if anybody's ever come across an MG BGT. If not, please Google it. So yeah, always been a petrol head, should we say. And always enjoying, you know, seeing those brands evolve, because I knew they came from family ideas almost, you know. And I was very privileged, a short story, I was very privileged to be in Spain 6 years ago, actually, 5.5, 6 years ago. And I actually met the very first founder of Costa Coffee. And he was explaining about how the brand, you know, was launched in London with his two brothers and how they grew the business, you know, and that was in early 70s, you know. So they were light years ahead, you know, of the, you know, the world of entrepreneurship, you know. So wonderful, wonderful family. So yeah.
Those stories of inspiration, people like sticking to their dreams and making them happen, that's really powerful.
Yeah, it's as I said earlier on, you know, it's difficult for people to have a dream or a desire, sometimes even an obsession, because they're too afraid of failure. Okay, the inner voice says, oh, no, stop, don't do that. Because what if you fail? It's embarrassing, of course it is. But what if you don't? You know, what if you don't? What if you do succeed? Which many people do, you know. So it's just having that desire, determination, and, as I said, discipline, you know, to see it through, you know, to, in other words, focus on the process, not the outcome.
Absolutely beautiful. So like quite an important part of your life was, you know, your marriage, and then it eventually led to divorce. Like, what was your experience around that time?
I think the marriage was wonderful. You know, we were married for, you know, 14 years in total, and, you know, almost 15 years, and the marriage was wonderful. You know, I loved the responsibility, the proudness of being married to a wonderful, beautiful human being, you know, and obviously the mother of my child, you know. So I think that responsibility certainly came with its knockbacks, because, you know, living in South Wales, certainly in the 90s and into the 2000s, it was tough, you know, it was really tough. And I guess it was a case of, well, you had to keep stepping forward. Don't sit back on your laurels. You keep stepping forward, you keep improving, keep growing, you know. And I guess for my work life, I always had that athlete mindset, but didn't know I had it. I knew that there was something underlying, because, as I said, my late father was always right. I don't have a stop button, you know, and I carried that through in my working environment as well, you know. So yeah, the marriage was wonderful, you know, holidays and lots of friends in the network and the community where we lived, you know. And I guess, unfortunately, we grew apart, you know. You know, my wife really enjoyed the home life, you know, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not knocking it. But for me, it was the outdoors, the movement, the sport, the activities, because I guess, you know, to use the words of my late father, that everything in life that we aspire for, you know, the house, the car, the shoes, the watch, you know, the possessions, when we then pass away, we hand all of that back. So technically, we only borrow it, you know, but the feelings, the emotions, the friendships, the experiences, that's what we take with us. Does that make sense, you know? So we grew apart and we decided, you know, to part company, you know, and it was not really what I wanted, but if it was the best thing for my wife and my daughter, then so be it, you know. And we agreed, and we parted company, you know, in 2005, 2006, you know, which was sad, because, as I said, you know, technically I got married for life, you know, and I wanted to be married for life, you know, to follow in the footsteps of my parents, you know, who were actually married for 56 years, you know. So, but, you know, people change will always happen, as they say, you know.
And there might be someone out there listening, and they might be going through a similar situation. Like often, you know, people go through a pretty difficult time when they're going through a separation and a divorce, and you know, both parties get affected. And if there's a man out there right now who's going through this, like, you know, what would you want to say to them based on your own experiences?
I think on my experience, the most difficult change for us as human beings, you know, is going into the unknown, you know, because as humans we love certainty, we love security, you know, as primates, and we don't like change, as I said, but we're perfectly made for change. So going through, I guess, the Kubler-Ross change curve, you know, of denial, shock, anger, then accepting what had happened, and then being brave and moving forward, you know. And that's what I did, you know. And there is always life, you know, after change, as we know, you know, with the pandemic, you know, a few years ago. So the advice I would give is to reach out to those around you, you know, most definitely, so they give you the support and the confidence that you need, you know, to move forward again, you know. And then, as I said, with the change curve, you come out the other side, know yourself, like yourself, love yourself, challenge yourself, you know. And that's probably where I'm at right now.
It's beautiful. And acceptance is really challenging, yet when we get there and we make peace with whatever that thing is, it's really empowering as well. And I think it's when we get there we realize, like what you've said, going through those different phases.
Yeah, most definitely, because we don't like the unknown, but when we get there, it's quite euphoric.
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we get older in life, like, we're going to have various experiences, and one of those is going to be around like losing a parent, and that happened to you, you know, during those mid-adult years, maybe I would say. And like, your mentor, someone who instilled all these values in you, like how did you like comprehend and deal with that?
Yeah, I think it's coming back to the words of Professor Steve Peters, that reality is reality. Because we live in perception to keep ourselves happy, subconsciously, you know. But when the reality of life and the process of life it is in front of you, then you have to deal with it, you know, and you have to deal with it emotionally, you know. You have to allow the body, the brain and the heart to go through that natural process. And I think, you know, having been told by my parents at a young age the process of life, and that time is the only commodity we can never buy back, you have to make the most of today. Because as my late father always said, tomorrow, you know, one day in the future will be your last day. So you suddenly then think, well, there's no point in trying to kid myself, you know. And there's a great poem that, you know, I recite on stage as a speaker called The Man in the Glass. And I suppose the true reality of the man in the glass is being honest with yourself, you know. And I think that then helped me even more so, you know, in 2009, you know, when the accident happened, you know, that knowing that if tomorrow arrives, I'm going to make the most of it, you know. So yeah, I feel very privileged that I learned all those good values, and now it's my turn to give back, you know. So it's gone full circle, you know.
Beautiful. You've touched upon 2009. So on the 2nd of May 2009, like, your life dramatically changed. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so as I said, I got divorced. I moved to the capital of Wales, which is Cardiff. You know, I was working for a PLC company, and, you know, just enjoying that transition from, you know, marriage into being single again, you know, and always having that drive, determination to be the best I could be, you know, always giving 100%. And one of my passions at the time, you know, apart from rock climbing and certainly triathlon, was paragliding. Because ever since I was a young child, I always wanted that Peter Pan moment, you know, just to experience the feeling of flight, you know, when your feet leave the floor and you get that weightless feeling, you know. And, you know, when I then qualified as a paragliding pilot, started flying with the club I was part of, and it was wonderful, you know, it was just an incredible experience. And then on the 2nd of May, 2009, which was a bank holiday in the UK, we'd agreed with the club to fly over the 2 days, you know, down in Swansea, which is in West Wales, on the, you know, the peninsula of West Wales called the Gower Peninsula. And we were flying over a very famous beach called Rhossili, which is, you know, a 3-mile beach, a beautiful part of South Wales. And the conditions were probably close on perfect, you know, maybe 20 degrees. We had a 12-mile-an-hour headwind coming in from the Irish Sea, and there were about 20 pilots, you know, flying that day, and everything was normal. Everything was almost perfect, as I said, you know. And then around 5 p.m, we'd probably had, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours flying time through the day. And one of the guys who I was having a coffee with said to me the famous word, "Shall we go back up?" And I said, yeah, why not? Because we've probably got about an hour left, you know, before the sun sets and the wind literally dissipates for the day, you know. So we, you know, hitched up the harnesses and launched the canopies, ran off the top of the hillside and just started flying, you know, enjoying that Peter Pan moment, you know. And then maybe 20 minutes later, as I'm flying across the top ridge, which is about 15 meters above the ground, I turned 90 degrees to my left to face the Irish Sea to get more lift, you know, off the hillside. And I basically flew into what they call a crosswind, which is 2 airstreams that fights for the same space, you know. And basically it blew out my canopy. So 20 foot of nylon just literally collapsed in like literally a second. And I'll never forget the noise that even now today, you know, almost 15 years on, I can still remember that sort of whoosh of the canopy actually collapsing, you know. And my first thought was obviously to look down at the grass, and the grass obviously came up at a rate of knots, and within 2 seconds I could just hear my feet hitting the floor and just this almighty thud. And not realizing at the time because exactly what had happened, because the canopy reinflated because of the swirling wind across the grass, and I got dragged for, I don't know, maybe 100 meters, you know, fully conscious, uncontrollable, almost like a rag doll in a washing machine, you know. And then it finally stopped, and I'm lying on the floor just trying to pull in the canopy lines, and I kept thinking to myself, oh my gosh, that was so close, because I'm in no pain. It's quiet. It's peaceful. And then I thought, well, I'll just sit up and just get myself off the floor, you know. And as I looked down my body, both my legs were twisted like pipe cleaners. And I thought to myself, oh dear, they shouldn't look like that. And I couldn't get my shoulders off the floor. And I kept thinking to myself that I must be caught on something, you know. But what I didn't realize is that I was paralyzed from the waist down, you know. So one of the guys who saw me crash, you know, he looped down, you know, landed, unclipped his harness, come running over and said to me, oh my gosh, are you still alive? Because obviously he saw the accident happen, and he was probably about 300 feet above me, you know. And I said, yes, but I can't feel my legs, you know. So immediately he radioed for the Wales Air Ambulance, who arrived, thankfully, in about 10 or 11 minutes. And I'll never forget the noise of the helicopter, you know, landing. And then the paramedics doing what they do best, you know, going to work, stabilizing me. And then, you know, placing the neck collar on and, you know, lifting me onto the spinal board, and then airlifting me off, you know, to hospital, which was probably only about 10 miles away. So we were there in minutes. And then going into the hospital, having an MRI and an X-ray, and just saying to the doctor, please just take my parents' phone number, ring them, tell them I'm okay, but I've had an accident, but I'm okay, just to give them peace of mind. So that afternoon, it was probably, maybe 6:30, 7 o'clock. I was taken in to have an X-ray and an MRI, and I'll never forget being in the ward that evening in Swansea Hospital and just lying there totally paralysed, thinking, oh my gosh, this is probably the end, isn't it? Because there's no movement, there's no feeling. And then, I don't know, whatever time it was, 8 p.m. maybe, just hearing footsteps coming down the corridor, And then I heard the voice. And the voice said these words that I'll never forget. Where is he? Where is he? I'll give him paragliding. Where is he? Who walks into the ward? My parents. My mother. I thought, oh my gosh, now I'm in for it. She's going to kill me. So you can imagine she's walked up to my bed. I'm totally paralysed from the waist down. She's crying, what have you done? What have you done? I said, well, I don't know yet, because I'm still waiting for the results from the X-ray and the MRI, Anyway, here comes the doctor. And he said, Mark, I've got some really bad news, I said, look, just tell me what I've done. Because I just wanted to know. Because when I knew, I could then deal with it. He said, unfortunately, you've broken your back. I said, what? I didn't think I'd broke my back. I just thought maybe I broke both my legs, He said, unfortunately, you've broken your back. I'm really sorry. And he walked off, And my father leaned over and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said to me, I told you, didn't I? Told you to be careful, Mr. Action Man. I said, look, Dad, please. Now is not the time, okay? But I think he was just worried about me, So obviously I'm crying, my mum's crying, and we're just trying to console each other, So it was a difficult time dealing with change, dealing with trauma, unconditional change. But it was just the start of a new life, And then the next day I was taken by ambulance up to the hospital in Cardiff so I could then, have my treatment ready then, for my spinal operation, which was a week later. So I've got 6 pins in my back because I broke T12, which is, the very last thoracic vertebrae, and ended up with a thoracic fracture, a huge fracture. So yeah, it was a tough time, 3 months totally paralyzed on my back, no movement, no feeling. And it got to the end of 3 months and I'd almost given up. I started speaking to my parents about euthanasia and, suicide, and just because I just didn't think there was a way out. How could there be? Because I guess if you lie in bed for a few hours and you rest and recover, and I say to people, go and try a few hours, maybe a day, then maybe a weekend. Now, you're not moving, you're not getting out of bed, you're not going to the shower, to the bathroom, etc. But you're just lying there. And after days and days and days, you start to think, well, this is probably it. And then when it rolls into weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and you suddenly think, oh, well, I may as well just get it over and done with. Put me in the box now, was my words to my dad. Worst thing I ever said. My dad caught hold of me one night and he said, listen to me now. You're going to get through this, okay? I said, Dad, I broke my back. My legs are not working, okay? What kind of life am I going to have? He said, you're going to get through this because you're a winner. Are you listening to me? Stop upsetting your mum. Stop upsetting me. Pull yourself together because you're going to get through this. And it was probably the best advice he could ever give me, because he knew me probably better than anyone, And that was the start of the rehab, The walking frame, I have to wear orthosis because my feet don't work. I have what they call lower leg paralysis. So only half of my legs work, basically. The other half of the muscles have all been affected, by the nerve damage in the spine, And the very last month in hospital, they sat me on one of the indoor bikes, the static bikes, just to get my blood pressure moving and my heart moving and my lungs back to the systems again, And that was just the start, because then when I left hospital, I knew that, okay, I didn't have full functionality, but I had some functionality, which was better than zero, And just started going back to the gym, started cycling again, albeit with a disability. I didn't go back to work, because I thought, well, I just need to get myself fit and strong and healthy first, and then I can go back to work, And then 1 year after my accident, we were raising money for the Wales Air Ambulance, who treated me on the day of my crash. And we were doing a charity cycle ride around Wales, around the four corners of Wales. And on the very first day, I'll never forget, arriving, seeing all these celebrities who were raising money, for the air ambulance. And there were some really famous people there, and I was like, oh my gosh, I know him. I've seen him on TV, And we finished the day, the first day, and I'll never forget sitting just, having my food after a shower and a sports massage. And this gentleman tapped me on the shoulder. So I turns around. I'd never met this guy before. And he says to me, when you finish your food, I'd like a quiet word with you outside. And he walked off. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done wrong? Because that's the first thought, isn't it? So I finished my food. I went outside, met this guy, and he says, what's wrong with your legs? I thought it's a bit of a weird question. So I explained it broke my back, got lower leg paralysis. And he continued to ask me a few questions, quite detailed questions about the human body. And I just thought, how does he know all these? How does he know all these questions and details? I didn't know who he was. So after a 20-minute conversation about my physical state as a disabled individual, I said to him, can I ask you a question? He said, yeah. I said, who are you? He said, my name is Dr. Ben Matthews. I'm a chiropractor. So I understand what's going on in your body, But how are you cycling with such a severe, accident and severe injury only 1 year after, And it's because my quads work, okay? My quads and my hip flexors work. The rest of my legs don't work. So I can push and pull on the pedals, And I explained, how I cycle with a disability. And then he said something to me that I suppose changed the course of my life forever. He said, can I ask you one more question before we go back inside? Because he was just inquisitive, I said, yes, of course. He said, are you training for the Paralympics in 2 years' time? I said, no. Why would I do that? He said, I think you should. And that was it. The light bulb moment. The vision of maybe just making it to the Paralympics just flooded my brain, So I gave this guy a hug. I said, thank you. Thank you for planting the seed that was always there. But after the accident, I was like, well, maybe it's all gone, And that was the start, because that week we finished the charity bike ride. We raised a pile of money for the Wales Air Ambulance who treated me. And I'll never forget Monica going home on the Saturday, walking into my parents' kitchen, giving my mum a big hug. And my mum said, so how was the ride? I said, oh, Mum, it was amazing. I met all these famous people. We raised a pile of money. It was brilliant. Have a guess what I'm going to start doing next week. She said, what's that? I said, do you know the Paralympics in 2 years' time in London? Oh, yes. I'm going to start training for the Paralympics. Oh, well, good luck. What would you like for tea?
Wow.
She just didn't even think, one, I was serious. Two, well, maybe. But she was more concerned that she needed to feed me more than anything, And here comes my dad, God love him. And he says, how are you, Mark? I said, yeah, great, Dad. Had a great week. Wonderful experience. He said, what's this Paralympic thing you're on about? I said, you know the Paralympics in 2 years' time, It's the Olympics for disabled people. Oh, yes. I said, next week I'm going to start training for it because I've connected with a coach called Neil Smith, who I'd been training with, for about 8 months at that point. Mark, listen, come here. He puts his arm around me and he says, listen, just go back to work. I said, what? I thought he was going to say, oh, amazing, great, I'll support you, fantastic. No, because he was worried. He was concerned. He said, just go back to work. Just forget this Olympic, Paralympic dream you've always had. Just go back to work, I said, listen, come here. I said, you taught me all my life, ever since I was a child, that if you have a dream, whatever that dream is, never give up until your eyes close for good. But Mark, you've broke your back. I said, I know. He said, have you lost the plot? I said, no, I'm serious. Now, you either get behind me and support me or get out of my way, because I'm serious. He turns to my mother, Margaret. He says, Margaret, have a word with your son. I think he's lost it. And he walked off. That was the only time I'd ever disagreed with my dad, because I knew that, remember, London was going to happen with or without me. I had 2 years to get there, and a big thanks to Neil Smith and certainly Disability Sport Wales, who helped me then to be introduced to British cycling, And when I did my testing with British Cycling, in 2010, they were like, wow, you've got this big engine and obviously the ability, to cycle, because I've cycled since I was a little kid. I've got this race brain, as they call it, And that was the start. That was the start and the journey to the famous epic London 2012.
Wow. So that seed was planted. Your parents did what parents do. Obviously, it's really important to feed the children. So, it kind of, I can kind of like completely get that environment. What was that journey of getting to the Olympics?
Yeah, well, I think it's dealing with what I call the 4 pillars of change, okay, which we'll come on to in a second. But one of the pillars is apprehension, which my parents were feeling, because they knew as soon as I committed, then it was all or nothing, and the clock was ticking, as I said. Big thanks to Neil Smith with his support. And then when Neil introduced me to British cycling, British cycling saw what we call a glimpse of brilliance. British cycling only select potential gold medalists. Okay, they don't select potential bronze or silver medalists because there's no money in those medals. The funding is only paid through the gold. Okay, so they saw something in me, And the one thing you have to become as a professional athlete is coachable. Okay, I didn't know how to get to the Paralympics. Didn't have a clue. I was not born a world or Paralympic champion. I was born, as you said, Margaret's boy. I had to become that person. Does that make sense? It's that metamorphosis from Margaret's boy into the professional athlete. What does it take? So I think the studies in college helped, the right diet, the right, intake of food, rest, recovery, fluid, hydration. And knowing that you have to give 100%, it didn't faze me because I've done it all my life. Does that make sense? So the transition then from 2010 into 2011, I took myself off to Crete for the winter just to train. Okay, just to train, because I couldn't train, in South Wales. The winter was just too severe, It's brutal, And I came back probably 14 kilograms lighter, and British Cycling were really happy, with the progress, with the change physically. And that then allowed me to become part of what they call the British Cycling Academy as a guest rider through the summer of 2011, but we're still now almost 18 months away from London, And I think it was, at the time, the steepest learning curve of my life, because you don't know what is ahead of you. I'd never trained for a Paralympics before, but I was happy to learn, I really was. And now being coached by probably the best, cycling coaches, on the planet. And a big thanks to the lottery funding in the UK, to Camelot, for supporting us as athletes, to support us financially, and British Cycling, as the facilitators. Neil Smith, I suppose, got me to a standard, a good standard, where British Cycling then could take me from good to great, because that's what they do, So that transition then through into the summer of 2011, I went to 5 races, came back with 5 medals. But it's still a big thanks to the coaches who are teaching me and coaching me all of these skills, who are giving me the program that works, because you don't get 105 gold medals by luck, because the system and the process works. So as an individual, I had to have belief in the organization. Think about this for one moment for your listeners. I had to have belief in the organization, British Cycling, okay? Belief in the process, in other words, the training program they give you. Belief in me as a human being. But the most important pillar of all is me having belief in myself doing the process. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that for me was a journey, a really exciting journey, training with the best cyclists in the world in Manchester, training on the track with people like Sir Chris Hoy, in the gym with people like Geraint Thomas, who went to Team Sky, Bradley Wiggins, Sir Bradley Wiggins, who won, the Olympic time trial and the Tour de France in the same year. Wow. And those people were being coached, by the people that's now coaching Margaret's boy. So it was a great privilege. It really was a great privilege, because I was coachable and I wanted to learn, because remember the goal and the dream of London 2012, as I said, was going to happen with or without me. So I had to do everything in my power to get there. Okay. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't, So it's a big thanks to Professor Steve Peters, who taught us to focus on the process, not the outcome, And then, into the winter of, 2011, unfortunately, Mr. Nice Guy was diagnosed with stomach cancer. Just a complete bolt out of the blue, something we didn't expect, because my dad was healthy all his life, never overweight, never unhappy, So that was then me having to deal with more change, and it was an aggressive tumor, it was inoperable, and they gave him 6 months, So from the sort of July, August, we got to Christmas and we thought, well, it's a blessing, he's still here. So we celebrated Christmas as a family, and then I got selected then for the World Track Championships, which was in Los Angeles. And what that meant was that for me to go to Los Angeles, if I medalled on the podium, then you're on the radar for London. Okay, not selected, but just on the radar as potential. But thankfully I was getting lighter, stronger, faster, So to go to Los Angeles with a skip in my step, I was really excited. First World Championships I'd ever been to on the track, And we had plans then to fly out to Los Angeles. And I'll never forget saying to my coach, look, I need to go and see my dad, okay? And my coach in British Cycling was a lovely gentleman called Tom Stanton. And Tom almost, I wouldn't say we became brothers, but we were really close, because you have that relationship, with your coach, totally transparent. He knew I had a love for Nutella, to name one but a few. And we got on really well. So I said to Tom, look, I need to go and see my dad, okay? And he said, okay, that's fine. Because they understand that my dad was in end-of-life care and he may not be there when I get back, So I had permission to drive, from Manchester to South Wales, spent the whole day with my dad, which was wonderful. And he was bedridden, unfortunately, being cared for by the hospice, a local hospice. And it was a very cathartical day, But I suppose looking back, in the back of my mind, I probably knew it was maybe the last day that I'd ever see him, because we were away for like 10 days, in Los Angeles. So I gave him a hug and a kiss and said, look, can you just do me just one thing? And he was like, yeah, okay, well, what do you need? I said, just be you when I get back, because I'm bringing that world champion medal back for you. So back to Manchester, we flew out to Los Angeles, a couple of days of training, and then I'll never forget that Thursday morning on the 9th of February. I woke up, looked at my mobile, and I had like 16 missed calls. And I guess even now, I knew. You just know. You get that horrible knot in your stomach, So, and it was, calls from my mum, So I rang my mum, and she said, look, I'm really sorry, but Dad's passed away. Early hours of the morning, in his sleep, peacefully. So that was a blessing for me, So we had a conversation, 15 minutes on the phone. And then obviously, I said, look, I'll see you, in a week or so when I get back, So explained to my coach exactly what had happened. And he said, look, I'll ring Steve. I said, who the hell is Steve? He said, I'll ring Professor Peters, Steve Peters, who is the sports psychologist back in Manchester, because it's his job, his responsibility to help athletes to go through that trauma, So I'm speaking to, Dr. Steve Peters, and I'll never forget the conversation. And he said, look, please, accept my sincere condolences for the loss of your dad, because he knew how close I was to my dad. So I said, oh, thank you. Much appreciated, He said, please take a seat. I have 3 questions for you. I need an answer, but I'll give you a minute or 2 to think about the answer. Don't just give me the answer. So I said, yeah, okay. So he said, look, we need to know what you want to do, okay? Do you want to fly home to be with your mum? If you do, you can. Nobody will judge you. We'll book a flight. A few hours' time, you can be on your way home. But your dad's not coming back. I said, okay. He said, now, if you want to stay, you can stay. You can stay and not race tomorrow in the final, the world final, but your dad's not coming back. Or you stay and you race, okay, for your country, but remember your dad's not coming back. I need an answer. What would you like to do? And I just thought, well, I've already made my mind up, I said, look, I'm going to stay. Okay, I'm not going to fly home. I'm going to stay. I'm going to race tomorrow in the finals. I'm going to race for my country, but more importantly, I'm going to race for my dad. He said, okay, good luck. And he put the phone down. I was like, hello? Hello? But that's reality. So the next day, in the 3-kilometer, pursuit, individual pursuit, I was privileged to win the very famous rainbow jersey, which is the jersey of a world champion. So all of those frustrations, anger, was still there, bottled up, but it was the joy of winning, a world championship medal, becoming a world champion, which was always a dream, albeit at the age of 42. So in my opinion, age is just a number on your birthday card, And then obviously flying back to attend my dad's funeral was heartbreaking, And I think that time of my life was, and still is, quite tainted, because I can't remember the race. I can remember winning. I can remember being on the podium, but I can't remember the race, the 12 laps. So that was... yeah, that was a very sad time indeed, as a family. I suppose even, as tough as my mum was, yeah, I suppose it was heartbreaking for her. They'd been married for 56 years. So then it was the summer of 2012, when I suppose the whole country, if not the whole world, got behind, the euphoria of the Olympics in London, which in my opinion was a great warm-up for the Paralympics. So yeah, it was an amazing summer, epic summer of sport, as I said, because the UK had a Wimbledon winner, we had a Tour de France winner, in Sir Bradley, and then the Olympics and Paralympics was just a million memories.
Amazing. Tell us about the 2012 Olympics and what you've achieved.
I think the first thing to share with your listeners is, I suppose, first of all, forget the accident. Okay, just think of the journey, that 30 years. The 30 years of thinking, hoping, wishing, dreaming, and then when the selection came through British Cycling, which is about 3 months before the games, okay, so they wait till the very last moment just to make sure that everybody's still putting in the training, going through the process. And I just kept thinking, I can't believe this. I kept reading the email over and over and over, and then obviously speaking to my mum and my daughter, and just feeling really proud, because I suppose you stop thinking about the accident, you stop thinking about the trauma, the heartache. Obviously, I'm never going to stop thinking about my dad, but you almost then start to park all of those feelings and just think, logically, not emotionally, And then going into the holding camp 2 weeks, 2 weeks before the games, and just training then obviously with all of the team, all of the Paralympic cycling team, and just moulding as a team, and just feeling privileged. And then finally everybody jumping on the bus, driving up the M4 in the UK from Cardiff, from the Cardiff area up to London, and then just arriving in just this cauldron of euphoria, where every day just felt like a Christmas morning, because the Paralympics were on the news and it was in the papers, and this was then the moment where online coverage started, because London was the very first online games. So you can imagine there's Twitter and there's millions of tweets going out, and just the activity was just huge, But you never take your eye off the responsibility that you're racing for your country. So that's when, as I said, it's a big thanks to my coach, Tom Stanton, who almost kept me in my lane, And, we didn't go to the opening ceremony because we were racing the next day. So we were in bed by 10 p.m. And I guess the medals, to start to talk about the performance. I was privileged to win the very first medal for Paralympics GB on the first day of competition, which was a silver in the sprint, which is 4 laps of the velodrome. And to think to myself, well, I've actually now gone down in history for winning the very first medal for Paralympics GB at a home games. Wow. I also then won a silver medal in the 10-mile time trial, or 16 kilometers, to my nemesis, a wonderful guy from Germany called Michael Teuber, who beat me by 12 seconds over 16 kilometers, And then my race, for me personally, which was the one I really wanted, was the 3-kilometer pursuit on the velodrome, which, as the world champion in that event, maybe the pressure was on, but I didn't really think about it. I just wanted to go there, perform, do my best, and then just almost, wait for the outcome, So to take your audience back, to the 31st of August, 2012, and that morning, the way that the race works is that you have qualification in the morning, okay, with all 14 riders, And then obviously the two fastest go through to the final, which is 4 hours later, you know. So that morning, as the world champion, I had the luxury of sitting and watching all the other riders put down their times, because you have the luxury of riding last. And I'll never forget my coach, you know, Tom, coming to me, and we worked out, you know, how fast I was going to ride. And I'd been riding on world record pace in training, but nobody knew, you know. So it was almost our ace up our sleeve, you know. And there's a young lad from China who raced before me in the qualification, and he's 18 years younger than me, called Yang Zi, and he broke the world record in my event, you know. How rude. So my coach said, look, as a team, we've got to now go and break the world record. He's with me, of course he is, you know, as a team player. We've got to break the world record to get into the final, okay? I said, okay, let's do it. Let's just smash it out of the park. Because I knew if I broke the world record in the qualification, 4 hours later, psychologically, the pressure's on the other guy, not me. Do you see what I mean? So we set the schedule, and I'll never forget, you know, the gun went off. I wound the bike up, got it up to about 50 kilometers an hour. And then that's when the race starts, you know. So you go through the laps, you know, just consistently holding that speed. And then finishing the qualification race, literally coming over the start-finish line, you know, to finish the race, looked up at the scoreboard, and there was no time. It just said WR, world record. I was like, oh my gosh, wow, okay. What I didn't realize is that I'd smashed it by 7 seconds, which was huge at the time, okay. So I came off, gave my coach a big hug, and he said, look, off you go, you know, go and warm down, have some food, have some fluid, you know, and have a power nap, and we'll see you in 2 or 3 hours' time. So I took myself off to a quiet part of the velodrome and just had, you know, a few hours to myself, just some downtime, quiet time, and put my earphones on, just, you know, listened to some music, fell asleep, actually. And then at 2:30 p.m., that was on my planner then to be back in the center of the velodrome then, ready to warm up, you know, get ready for the final, you know. And I'll never forget actually walking down into the center of the velodrome and just thinking to myself, you know, this is it. This is almost something I've waited for. Yeah, 30 years, you know. Always thinking and hoping, but never thought it would happen. And just thought, well, my dad would probably never believe this. But now it's time to focus. Now it's time to become that warrior again, you know, where as athletes, you know, you get paid to hurt yourself in a controllable way, because you have to control the controllables. And then I thought, right, this is it. I'm just going to give this everything, okay? Because in sport, and this is what I talk about now as a coach, if you can accept giving your best, you get used to it. It's a habit, okay? It's a habit. So when you know how to give 100%, not 105, because that doesn't exist, but just giving your best 100%, you almost look forward to it because you know your ability, you know. So it's about 2:35, 2:40 p.m. Started my warm-up, and the warm-up's about 15 to 20 minutes. So you have a stretch, and then obviously get ready then to go on to the track for the final, you know. Now, this is quite strange. When you go into an Olympics or Paralympics, you don't get to pick your race number. It's given to you, okay, in the pack with the accreditation and stuff. And my race number was 42, which was my age.
Wow.
It's like, hang on. It's almost like it's written for me, you know. So finished my warm-up, had a brief with my coach, and he said, so how are you feeling? I said, I feel great. And I did. He said, so shall we set the schedule for the same time as this morning? I said 100%, because I'm ready. I'm ready to smash this out of the park, you know. So we set the schedule, which is exactly the same time as the morning, which is world record pace. But I didn't know how I was going to feel in the 12-lap race. Does that make sense? So I'd had this conversation with my coach that I was more than happy to ride on world record pace again, you know, because this moment in time was never going to happen again, So, set the scene. They've placed my bike into the gate, the race gate on the track. The physiotherapist has helped me up, onto the track, because they've called my name and my number, Mark Colbourne, 42, Great Britain, come to the track. And I'll never forget stepping onto the bike, clipping in my cycling shoes, gathering my thoughts and just relaxing, because there's no need to stress anymore. You just go through the process, because I had done this start thousands of times. I'd ridden 12 laps hundreds and hundreds of times. And I'll never forget, Monica, sitting on that bike, holding the handlebars, just thinking to myself, this is it. This is it. And then I just had this really strange thought. This race is going to start when I'm ready. I've waited 30 years for this. I'm not going to rush it. And as I looked over to the other side of the track, the rider, Yang Zi from China, his green flag was in the air with his commissaire, with the judge, to say he was ready. And I just thought, no. It'll start when I'm ready. So here comes my coach. He says, everything okay? I said, yeah, fine. He said, are you ready? I said, you bet. And he whispers to me, do this for your dad. And he walks off the track. Gives the okay to the commissaire. Commissaire puts my green flag in the air, and the first beep goes off, which is the 12-second countdown. There's no going back now. There's no thinking, is my tyres pumped up? Is my skin suit done up? I hope my shoes are done up. There's no going back. It's now all or nothing, So then it's the last 5 seconds of the beeps until the gun goes off, and then all hell breaks loose, because you have to just go through that process. So first 2 laps, I've wound the bike up. I've hit 50 kilometers an hour, and I've settled on the skis, the front cycling pads. And I'll never forget just maintaining that speed through lap 4, lap 6, and just thinking to myself, well, this guy's obviously not caught me, so I must be in with a shout. And I'll never forget coming around the corner on lap 9, I think it was, and looking up the track and just seeing the other rider. So I'm now catching this guy. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'll never forget that voice in my head just saying to me, just stay upright. Don't fall off. Not now. You're literally 60 seconds away from a gold medal. Just stay upright. Don't go crazy. So you just focus on the process, And then on the very last lap, as I came around the corner, the guy was about 25, 30 meters in front of me. And then I crossed the start-finish line, knowing in my head that I'd won. But what I didn't realize is when I looked up at the scoreboard, there was just 2 letters, WR, wow. World record. I was like, oh my gosh, I broke it again. Which is a crazy feeling, So you can imagine the whole velodrome, that afternoon was just a cauldron of noise, excitement, relief, as well, coming off the track. The first words I said to my coach, thank you. Just thank you, And then, yeah, just the interviews and the TV and radio, and then obviously standing on the podium when this was given to me, for being patient, for putting in the hard work, for having that discipline, doing what I hate, but doing it like I love it, and I guess it's a big testament, to the support of my family, and certainly the coaches of British cycling, and certainly Neil Smith, who still even now, 14, 15 years on, is still a close friend, one of my best friends, But I suppose for me, it's, a celebration to my dad, to say thank you, to him. And it just proves really that when you do have a dream, never give up, because in my opinion, the best dreams happen when you're awake.
Amazing. I was wondering what was in that box, Mark. So, yeah, just for those of you who are listening, we've got this amazing gold medal in front of us. So, congratulations again.
Thank you.
The way you've described like this journey, this 30-year dream is like never give up. And like when it's your time to achieve that dream, with all the work that you've done, you talked about those pillars that you followed.
Yeah.
It just shows that what we're capable of and what is
100%.
possible.
Yeah, because going into the games, with those 4 pillars, which is apprehension, fear, doubt, and uncertainty, And Professor Steve Peters said, as long as you're willing to give 100%, you have to accept the outcome. Okay. Now that guy that day could have been quicker than me, but I know by giving 100%, I would have then celebrated the success, because my gold medal is myself giving 100%. So my 100% is my gold medal. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And if the guy was quicker than me on the day and faster than me, so be it. So you have to accept the outcome, And some people can, some people can't, But I think that's a whole process and journey in life, is to plan, do, and review, but then give 100%. And whatever that outcome is, if you get another chance and you didn't succeed, great. But if there is no second chance and you didn't succeed, just accept it. Accept it and move on.
Powerful. Amazing. Thank you so much, Mark. So, Mark, we're sitting in here in this room in this amazing podcast studio. It's 2024. What are you doing now?
Yes, well, as I said, I moved to Dubai 2 years ago. Unfortunately, my late mum passed away January 2020. So it was a real heartbreak, for me to see my mum go. January 21. Sorry. So then I kept thinking to myself, well, what do I do now? And as I said, my vision is to help and inspire people, but also to help them to inspire themselves, which is really important. So I thought, well, I need to look after my health, because, my body has looked after me for so long. It's now my turn to give back to my own self. So to move to Dubai, for the weather, 52 weeks of dry weather. I know July and August is very hot, but, so be it. And now at the age of 54, I don't feel my age. I'm cycling every week, either on Al Qudra or the Medan cycling track, and coaching other people, to cycle as well. And obviously, the speaking engagements and the coaching to help businesses improve, through peak performance, mindset, resilience, adversity, helping with, mental health projects as well. It's a great privilege, to help other people, to give back,
And where can people find out more about you?
Well, they can either contact you, I'm only joking, through obviously your podcast, but markcolbourne.com, please feel free to reach out, obviously on any one of the social media platforms as well, So yeah, we look forward to connecting with your audience and hopefully helping other people to live out their dream, and their aspirations, and teaching people, I guess, the skills, and I know this is going to sound quite wrong really, but if you follow those 5 skills and the 5 laws to success, which is accept compromise, sacrifice, change, outcome. You have to accept the outcome, and just have self-belief,
Absolutely. And, the journey you've spoken about is relevant for all aspects of our lives, our personal, our professional, and everything in between as well. So if it's inspired our listeners and, anyone else out there, then that's something that we've made a positive impact by, by doing that.
100%. And, my late father used to say, if you want to achieve something and it's been done before, just do what that person did, but just do it better. So just learn from what they did, And I think in today's environment, there is no excuses, okay? The only excuse is in your head. So overcome it, and just never look back, and we call it thinking above the line, just thinking positive and doing positive things, creating those habits, because we are creatures of habit, so yeah, but thank you, good luck to your audience, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, thanks for being part of the You Got This podcast. Before we say goodbye, what would you like to share with our audience when it comes to the topic of overcoming?
I think overcoming anything, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's financial, you have to first of all understand what went wrong, okay? Because as human beings, we don't like being left in the dark. Because when we know what went wrong, we can either change it if it's going to happen again, or just accept it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. And as I said earlier on, reach out to your network. You can't, it's impossible to do everything on your own. You need people around you for advice, for help, comfort sometimes, sometimes even just a hug and a tap on the shoulder, and a pat on the back goes a long way, because it makes us feel amazing, because we are emotional creatures, So yeah, reach out, definitely. And don't be afraid, to be open, which is something that I learned at British Cycling. Don't hold anything in, because, and I'll share this just to finish, I like helping people. I really enjoy helping people and organizations, etc. And some people don't understand why I do that, because I technically don't care what people think about me, because I care about people.
Powerful. Thank you so much, Mark. It's been a true honor to have you here, and I really appreciate you taking the time out.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, and good luck, everybody. Take care.